The rumble of 150 Harleys tore through the streets of Willow Creek, a small town nestled in the rolling hills of Oregon, on a crisp October morning in 2023. American flags fluttered along the entire stretch of Main Street, their red, white, and blue snapping in the autumn breeze. Police officers stood at attention, their faces unreadable but their presence deliberate, as if bracing for something monumental. The town council had predicted a modest turnout for John Harper's funeral, a quiet affair, they said, for a man who'd lived quietly. But when the engines roared, the whole town fell silent, gripped by a sound that shook the earth. Sarah Harper, John's widow, stood on her porch, her tear-streaked face meeting a wall of leather-clad bikers standing like sentinels. This wasn't a scene from some gritty film. This was the Devil's Legion, a motorcycle club, honoring a vow to a fallen brother. John's casket, draped in the stars and stripes, rolled through a guard of honor as townsfolk pressed hands to their chests in reverence. But for this moment to happen, the bikers had to defy a town that had turned its back on one of its own. What unfolded that day wasn't just a funeral, it was a rebellion of loyalty that left millions weeping. Sarah Mitchell had always hated silence. For 15 years, her home with John had been alive with his low chuckle, the clatter of wrenches in his garage, or the soft hum of his banjo on lazy evenings. Now, silence crushed her like a stone she couldn't shift. Just a month ago, John had been in their kitchen, teasing her about burning the toast, his grin lighting up the room. Now, she stood alone, staring at a folded American flag on the counter, her breath shallow and uneven. John Harper wasn't a man you forgot easily. A former Marine gunnery sergeant, he'd served 3 tours, 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, earning medals for courage and the quiet respect of his unit. Back in Willow Creek, he was the guy who'd fix your car for free if you were down on your luck, the veteran who carried scars you couldn't see. Burn pits had ravaged his lungs, nightmares stole his sleep, but he'd limp in from the garage with a smile, asking Sarah about her day as if his pain was just a whisper. They never had kids, a choice they'd made together, and in a way, John's garage became his family. Old war buddies would swing by for a beer or to tinker with their bikes. And then there was Tommy Bear Lawson, a hulking figure in denim and leather who'd show up with spare parts John hadn't asked for but always needed. When John's lungs finally betrayed him, it was a slow, brutal defeat. Sarah sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand as machines breathed for him. The night before he slipped away, he looked at her with those steady hazel eyes and whispered, "Don't let them forget me, Sarah." She promised, though she had no idea how to keep it. The funeral home was kind, but money was tight. The town council, when she asked for help with a proper veteran send-off, gave her the same tired excuse: budgets already set. Sarah left that meeting with her fists clenched, nails biting into her palms. John had fought for his country, rebuilt this town's broken engines, and they couldn't even give him a decent goodbye. She planned a small service at the Veterans Cemetery outside town, just her, a few friends, maybe Bear and a couple of John's old squad mates. That would have to do. She didn't have the cash or the strength for more. But promises have a way of taking on a life of their own, spreading to those who hear them, binding them in ways you don't expect. One chilly Wednesday afternoon, Sarah was sorting through bills when the familiar growl of a Harley pulled into her driveway. She didn't need to look to know it was Bear. His bike had a deep, deliberate rumble, like it was announcing itself to the world. He knocked, and when she opened the door, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard. "Sarah, you didn't tell me about the funeral." She shrugged, feeling a pang of guilt. "It's just gonna be small, Bear." Didn't want to bother anyone. He stepped inside, pulling off his sunglasses, his eyes sharp with something fierce respect, maybe, or defiance. John wasn't small, he said. His send-off shouldn't be either. Sarah started to protest, mentioning money, but Bear cut her off. "This ain't about money. It's about honor. Let me make some calls." His tone left no room for argument, and deep down, Sarah felt a spark of hope she hadn't known she'd lost. Bear rode off, his Harley's roar fading into the dusk. His first stop was a weathered bar on the edge of Willow Creek, its walls plastered with faded motorcycle posters and club insignias. Inside, a dozen men in leather vests paused their conversation as Bear walked in, his presence commanding the room. "John Harper's gone," he said, setting his helmet on the table. "Lungs gave out last week." The town's giving Sarah nothing but excuses. She's planning a small funeral, but that ain't right. The room went quiet. An older biker, known as Cutter, leaned forward. What's the plan? Bear's voice was steel. We give him the send-off he'd have given any of us. Every patch, every bike, every brother who can ride. We shut down Main Street if we have to. Cutter nodded, and the room erupted into action. Phones out, calls made, messages sent across states. By nightfall, riders from Seattle to San Diego were responding. I'm in. Sarah tried to keep her routine, folding laundry, brewing coffee, sorting John's tools, but Bear's words echoed in her mind. Let me make some calls. 3 days later, she got a glimpse of what was coming. Early morning, 5 Harleys rolled down her street in tight formation, their riders dipping their heads as they passed her window. By evening, she'd seen a dozen more, silent but unmistakable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bear. Don't worry. Be ready Saturday. Her heart raced. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than she'd dared to hope. By Thursday, Willow Creek was buzzing. Locals whispered about the endless stream of motorcycles pouring in from the interstate. Gas stations were packed with riders fueling up, their patches marking them as Devil's Legion. At the bar, Bear and Cutter mapped out the plan. 3 convoys converging from different directions, blocking Main Street for the hearse. The police chief, Tom Bradley, agreed to look the other way as long as it stayed respectful. We're not here to cause trouble, Bear told the riders. We're here to show the world what John meant. By Friday, the bar's lot was a sea of chrome, bikes from 6 states lined up like an army. Stories about John Floyd, a free tire patch in Nevada, a daring rescue in Fallujah. Sarah, still at home, had no idea hundreds were gathering for her husband. Saturday dawned clear and sharp, the kind of day John would have spent riding. Sarah stood at her kitchen window, clutching a mug, steadying herself for the day ahead. She'd laid out John's dress blues the night before, the folded flag beside them. Outside, the town was waking to something extraordinary. In a supermarket lot, the first convoy assembled, bikes gleaming, exhaust curling in the cool air. 2 more waited on the town's edges, engines idling. Bear gave the signal, and the air exploded with the roar of 150 Harleys moving as one. Townsfolk stepped onto porches, stunned, as the formation rolled through. Chief Bradley watched from the station, his officers quietly removing their hats. The convoys merged on Main Street, stretching nearly 2 miles, a disciplined wall of steel that stopped traffic dead. No one complained. No one dared. Sarah heard at first a low rumble that grew until her windows shook. She stepped onto her porch and froze. A river of motorcycles filled her street, headlights blazing, riders solemn. Her neighbor, Mrs. Ellis, gasped, "Is this for John?" Sarah could only nod, tears spilling over. The hearse rolled at the center, flanked by riders standing tall, the American flag on John's casket glowing in the sun. Bear, at the front, gave her a nod that broke her heart. The town fell silent, the Angeen's growl the only sound, a pulse that carried John's memory through the streets. At the church, Sarah stood on the steps as the convoy slowed, bikers dismounting to form 2 lines, helmets off, heads bowed. The hearse passed between them, the flag fluttering. Inside, the service was simple but heavy with meaning. A veteran shared how John had saved his life in Iraq. Bear told of John fixing a stranger's bike in a storm. Each story painted a man who'd touched lives far beyond Willow Creek. When the casket was carried out, the engines roared again, a heartbeat guiding John to the cemetery. At the veterans' cemetery, under oaks swaying in the breeze, the convoy split to flank the lane. Sarah stepped from her car, the Angeen's rumble steadying her. The honor guard folded the flag with precision, presenting it to her with words of gratitude from a nation. Bear stepped forward, holding a note in John's handwriting. "If I'm gone, take care of Sarah. Don't let her face the world alone. That's why we're here," Bear said, his voice thick. "We're keeping that promise." The riders nodded, a silent vow. As the service ended, the bikers rode out slowly, each offering Sarah a nod or a hand over their heart. Bear handed her an envelope, money from every rider to cover the funeral and more. "John would have done it for us," he said. She clutched it, overwhelmed by the miles they'd ridden, the loyalty they'd shown. As the last bike faded into the hills, Sarah stood by John's grave, the flag in her arms, knowing she wasn't alone. The town would talk about this day for years, the day the Devil's Legion shut down Willow Creek. Not for power, but for love. But here's where it gets messy. Was it right for the bikers to take over the town, bending rules and flexing their presence, even for a good cause? Should the town council have stepped up, or was their budget excuse justified? And what about Sarah? Should she have accepted the money, knowing it came from a group some call outlaws? Hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts below. Was this a beautiful act of brotherhood, or did it cross a line? Tell us what you think, and let's keep this story alive.